Hey folks, welcome back. I hope some of you saw my video previously on the Starfleet Battles game system, which as I mentioned is one of my favorites out there. I mentioned, I think briefly during that video, that Starfleet Battles has a somewhat simpler sibling game called Federation Commander, which looks a little bit more modern. And that's what I wanted to cover today. So Federation Commander is very, very close in relation to Starfleet Battles. If you start with Federation Commander, you can quite easily move up to Starfleet Battles at a later date because all the core concepts are there and are very similar. However, it does strip away a lot of the really detail-oriented stuff that's in SFB in favor of making things more straightforward for new players especially, and to allow starship captains to kind of fly a bit more by the seat of their pants. You don't have things like the big energy allocation forms and stuff like that. It's much more sort of in the moment. You can make decisions about your movement speed and all that kind of stuff. But more about that as we get into it. The big trouble with Federation Commander, similar to SFB, but I think it's actually a bit worse in the case of FC, is that it's hard to work out what to buy initially. So hopefully I'll give you a sort of whirlwind tour of the game system today, and I'll try and give you my advice about what to pick up to get the best bang for your buck if you're just getting into the game system, because it is a little bit confusing, and particularly if you're looking into getting stuff in PDF form. The PDF products don't really line up in the way that you would expect with the physical products, so I'll talk a little bit more about that as well. But basically, if you want to get started with the game system, you need to get one of the border box starter sets, and there are two of those. There's one called Klingon Border, which you'll see right here, and another called Romulan Border. They both contain a lot of the same base components like map sheets, counter sheets, etc. However, they have different mixes of ships and slightly different rule books. The Klingon Border focuses on the rulebook focuses on the weapons and systems that you will find in Federation and Klingon vessels, for example, whereas the Romulan Border set includes rules for plasma torpedoes, which are a little bit more complex. However, they did come up with a way to kind of get all that stuff without repeating yourself, if you like. So what I did was I bought Klingon Border as my main box set, and then you can see buried down somewhere in this stack, we have Romulan Space. Now, Romulan Space is basically all of the stuff that is in the Klingon Border box set with none of the repeats. Okay, so with Klingon Border and Romulan Space, or vice versa, you can get Romulan Border and then Klingon Space, you will have everything that is in the two border sets without having to buy a bunch of repeated stuff. And you save, about $20 by doing that. So that's a good thing. And right out the gate, that's the first thing you should know when you're looking to shop around for some FC stuff. So what do you get in your basic border set? Well, you get a decent amount of stuff, but you'll see right away that you get a lot less ships than you do in SFB, and there's a reason for that. So here you go. Defend the Federation or bring glory to the Empire. Take the helm of a Constitution-class heavy cruiser and hold the border against the Klingon invasion. So as you can see, designed from the ground up for fast play. It's got laminated full-color ship cards that let you play immediately. That right there is the reason for the difference in the amount of ships in the game. But you still get a lot of good stuff in here. You get your rules, scenario, and background stuff. 256 counters, and they come in both half-inch and 1-inch sizes, which is great. You get 6-panel mounted color map boards. These also have 2 different sizes of hexes, depending on whether you want to use the small counters or the large ones. Note that some of the ships are only available in the half-inch size, like the Shuttles, for example. But the main starship-sized, cruisers, frigates, dreadnoughts, etc., they come in both sizes. And of course, you get a rule book, and you get a couple of dice, and you also get a dry erase marker that you can use on your nice laminated chip cards. Now, I'm going to say right away that my box set is going to be filled with some other random stuff, because Federation Commander survived a bit better my problems with movers in recent years. So this set, actually, of all this stuff, has been played pretty much. Next to me here, you can see I've got all these boxes of punch counters, and these have lasted the distance since I first bought this game back in about 2007. My box came with this promo for the Starfleet Battle Force card game, which I've never played, so I can't say much about that. But here you go. Here's some samples of the beautiful laminated chip cards that you get for this game. So no more black and white SSDs like you get in SFB. These are half letter size, so 5.5 inches by 8.5 inches, fully laminated and full color. And you notice that each ship has 2 sides, right? One says fleet scale, one says squadron scale. Squadron scale is more detailed. So if we look at just this ship, for example, we can see there, there's 28 shield boxes on the front sides here, 30 shield boxes in the front, 22 in the back. We can see there's a bunch of internal systems. We've got some tracks to mark which weapons we've used. We've got a couple of shuttles, some drone health trackers down here. When we flip it to the fleet scale, everything's chopped in half. Now we only have one shuttle. These shields are 14 instead of 28. Front shield is 15 instead of 30. We've got a lot less internal boxes inside the SSD, and we've got half as many drone tracks as well, and a much smaller number of weapons. So that's essentially it. If you're flying in fleet scale, use the fleet scale cards. All the weapons and everything work the same. They do the same amount of damage, but all the ships have half as much point value, half as much internal boxes that allow them to survive, and half as much shield and everything else. So basically, it allows you to run a quicker game. So if you want to do a couple of big squadrons against your friend, you can do it in fleet scale, and it'll go by much more quickly than if you're doing everything with squadron scale ships. But the flip side, of course, is that if you're doing squadron scale, you have more opportunity to kind of get some intricacy in your combat and have some interesting back and forth slugfests. If you're playing in fleet scale, a big volley will pretty much take out even the fairly larger ships. But it does mean it's really punchy, fast-moving action, which is great. So having that option is really fantastic. For those of you who know about SFB and that there is an introductory SFB system, which is called the Cadet system, that is like a very nicely structured introductory product that gets you from a very simplified form of SFB up to the full game with 32 impulses and all the rest of it. The ships that are in that game, the simplified Cadet game, are basically identical to fleet scale Federation commander ships. So that's what I'm saying about the translatability between the two game systems. So the squadron scale ships are a pretty direct translation of the regular SFB SSDs for a given ship. And the same ships will appear in both game systems because they're all functioning on that kind of highly detailed Starfleet universe background. And the fleet scale ones map to the cadet scale ships in SFB. But the rules are different, and more on that in a minute. So in your beginning product, your border boxes, you will get about 16 ship cards, I believe. Each will have the two different versions on either side. So in the Klingon border, we get some Kazinti stuff. We, of course, get some Klingons, like the fantastic C7 heavy battlecruiser. We get more Kazintis, a couple of Orions. You can see here, looking a bit more impressive on the squadron scale side there. We've got a Tholian patrol corvette, which is the classic small but mighty ship that they use. We've got some generic stuff like freighters. We've got a monster scenario with the Planet Killer, which is a lot of fun. And then we have, these are some bits from other expansions, so not particularly relevant here, but each of the expansions that you can see here adds other empires from the SFB universe, and along with them you get the additional rules you need for the weapons for those empires. So in the War and Peace set, you get content for the Andromedan. So here you can see some Andromedan weapon tables for you, which are also beautifully laminated and in color, which is really nice. And you get sort of a PPD table for the ISC and ion cannons for the Vudar and all that kind of stuff. Then there are these tracking sheets for fighters. The Hydrants do have fighters in this game system, but one of the things about FC that simplifies it down from SFB, is that you have a lot less counters on the board. You don't have as many fighters, you don't have gunboats, you don't have loads and loads of drones. So that's one of the ways that the game is faster playing. But the Hydrants, because fighters are kind of their thing, they do have fighters in the base FC game as well. And they are planning to add fighters for other races in FC, but it's a little bit controversial, but they are going to be heavily simplified compared to what's available in SFB. I think each race will get one type of fighter, and that's it. So this Distant Kingdoms card, we get our fighter mini SSDs here, and then we get the appropriate tables for Hydrant and Lyran people, and then we also have a Moray Eel monster scenario. Tholian attack, we get a webcaster table. We get a little chart here to track your web that you're spinning around the board. And on the other side, again, we have some expansion weapon charts. So we have asteroid damage chart, web fist, shield cracker from the Saltorians, and the particle cannon for the Tholians, and the web breaker for the Saltorians as well. This card, Yeah, this is from Romulan Border. So this is one of the cards that came in the Romulan Space set. It gives us our plasma torpedo information, some tracking table that we can use, filling in again with a dry erase marker, plasma bolt table, plasma carnad, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, then we also have, what else? Another reference card. This one is again for Romulan Border. And here's the handy impulse procedure. Now, the other way that FC really speeds things up from SFB is that we have 8 impulses per turn instead of 32. But it's a little bit of a trick, right? If you look closely, you'll see that each impulse actually has 4 movement subpulses, okay? So you still effectively have speeds from 2 to 32, right? But what you do is that you instead, your turn is broken into 8 impulses, and depending on your speed, you can move between 0 and 4 hexes per impulse. So if you're moving at maximum, you can move basically 4 hexes per impulse times 8, which is the same as speed 32. But it really does help to speed the game up, because instead of making a decision after every hex moved and having to update every counter on the board, every hex moved, you're just doing it in these kind of 4 hex bursts, and you're following a pretty straightforward sequence of play during each impulse. So you pay for your acceleration if you want to, you can pay for a higher energy turn, then you do your movement, then you do defensive fire, offensive fire, other functions like dropping, raising shields, using your transporters, and then you have a launch phase at the end of the impulse where you can shoot torpedoes, drones, and shuttles. So that really is a big structural change that massively speeds up the game effectively. Down beneath here, you will see this is the big old reference sheet that comes in. I think this is identical between Klingon Border and Romulan Border. It says Romulan Border on the top, but I think they're basically the same. So here you have the sequence of play that covers all 8 impulses, including your start of turn stuff, where your energy allocation is. Notice that you don't fill out a form, you just calculate how many power you have, and they actually give you these energy kind of coin tokens to mark your energy if you want to, or you can write them directly on the card itself by either circling the numbers here or using a paperclip for the 10s and the 1s, which is what I tend to do. So you just need to work out your speed first, and you do that by looking at the table on your ship card. It'll tell you what your base speeds are, which can be 8, 16, 24, and then you pay the cost that's on the card out of the energy that you worked out. And that's the only energy allocation that you do at the beginning of the turn. The rest, which is, paying for your weapons and stuff that you would normally allocate in the SFB game in different ways, you can do that on the fly by just keeping track of your energy on the card. And if you fire a phaser, knock your energy down by 1, and there you go. You do have to pay for photon or other heavy weapon preloading at the beginning of the turn as well, or if you want to regenerate your shields. But you can do other stuff like shield reinforcement on the fly. At the end of every impulse, you get your launch phase to shoot drones or whatever. So it really is a lot simpler in how you manage your ship's energy, because you just calculate your speed, preload heavy weapons if you need to, and everything else you're kind of doing as you go. Also on this card, we have our Marine hit and run table, cost for repair, a reference to firing arcs, standard stuff like Phaser 2 and research labs charts. The all-important damage allocation works differently in this game. So the way that it works in Federation Commander is simplified. If I shoot a volley at your ship, then instead of rolling the dice for every point of damage in that volley that gets through to your ship through the shields, I will roll the dice once. I'll get one of these 6 tables, and I just read across for however many points I've scored. So if I rolled 1, and I did say 5 damage, then that would take out 1 right warp, 1 impulse, 1 left warp, 1 forward hull, 1 lab, 1 transporter, 1 and so on if I had more damage points. And if you don't have any boxes left of whatever that is, then you go to the alternate. You can also put damage directly on frame if you want to preserve a certain weapon system or something, but you'll see that in the rulebook. And also here we have our phaser reference tables, disruptors, and photons. So these are your kind of core weapons for the main kind of classical Star Trek empires, if you like. And you get a couple of these sheets, which is really handy. I'll show you the other ship cards that are in here too. I think these are indeed still split up as per Klingon border originally. The Klingon D7, this is a classic. So as I mentioned in the other video, the classic duel in Starfleet battles is between the Klingon D7 and the Federation CA. Still works just as well in Federation Commander. And in fact, you can see I've got those two cards up at the top of the pile here because they are just a classic duel. It's if I want to teach somebody the game, these are the cards I'm going to bust out first. Everybody knows this is the Enterprise, basically, and this is a Klingon bird of prey, and they want to fight it out. Then we've got the big beast, the Dreadnought, with 6 photons up in the front there, loads of phasers everywhere, 4 drone racks as well, a lot going on with that guy. We got a duplicate Dreadnought, we got Light Cruiser, which is an older design that has some armor as well for extra protection. We got the speedy frigate, goes down quickly but has a decent weapon spread on it. The hefty Klingon C8 Dreadnought, which you do not want to mess with. Lots of disruptors, few drone racks there, a lot of different kinds of firepower. The Fed Battle Cruiser, which is a lot of fun to fly as well. Could go toe-to-toe with the Klingon Dreadnoughts. Then you've got a Klingon frigate and a D6 heavy cruiser, another classic. So you get a lot of great ships in this box, but you do only get 16. If you compare that to the base set of SFB, you get 48 ships. So it's a bit of a downgrade, but they are so much nicer and so much more convenient to use. Right out of the box, you can just break out the rule book. If you're familiar with SFB as well, you can learn it really quickly. Break out your D7 and your Fed CA and just start going at it, just marking up these and wiping them off when you're done, which is really great and convenient. So it really is a much more attractive package if you're trying to get a new player into this kind of SFU universe, right? Also in here, besides the reference sheets, there is a Master Weapons card. I'm not sure, this may have come in War and Peace, I think. It's not in the base set, but this has all the handy weapon charts that you need for every weapon in the FC game system so far, which is really handy to have. And then randomly there's an Orion Pirate symbol there. So maybe it came in the Orion Attack. There we go. So that's useful. You also have these little cards, which you can use as kind of a way to remind yourselves what's going on, what state of the turn you're in. So at the start of the turn, do all this stuff, flip the card over, then look at impulse 1, do all that stuff, blah, blah, blah. And it tells you, which speeds can move in which of the 4 steps of each impulse. So quite convenient and useful for beginner players. Once you've done a couple of turns, you won't need it anymore. There's also cards here that are handy to give players if you want to remind them what options they have with their movement. Tell them, okay, you can do different types of turns. You can side slip left, you can side slip right. You can choose to accelerate. You can do a high energy turn. These are all helpful things, kind of mnemonics for new players. Then we have the rulebook. Now, one of the things I would recommend, when you start out, you'll be fine with the Klingon Border rulebook plus the additional content in the Romulan Space set, which gives you the plasma stuff that you need. You don't really need much more than that to start with. But I'm going to recommend that you get the reference rulebook, which I'll show you in a minute, just because it's everything in one package, and then you can decide, partially using that, where you want to go next. And here we have some nice hard-mounted map boards, much nicer quality than the map sheets that you get in SFB. And as you can see, you get big hexes or small, which is really great. They're a nice full color, and they really are nice thick cardboard, really hefty. And you get a bunch of these in the main box. You get 6 of these sheets. I'm not going to show you all of them because they're basically all the same. And then in the expansion sets, you get additional types of map boards that include things like planets, asteroid fields, and that kind of stuff. And you get your marker, a couple of dice, and some paper clips that you can use for your energy tracking on the side of your ship cards. So that's basically what you get in the core box. It's a really good package. I mean, it's completely packed to the gills, as you can see. There's not a shortage of content in this box. You will have a lot of fun with what's in here. And then there are a number of different ways that you can then expand your battles. Okay. One of the ways that you can do that is with booster packs. You can see a pile of those over here. But first, what I'm going to show you is what you get with Romulan Space and the reference rulebook, which would be my next recommendations. And from there, I would say check out what strikes your interest out of the weapons and stuff that are available in the reference rulebook, and use that to decide which expansions might be for you. Okay, so Romulan Space, if you look on the back, it says, this product expands Federation Commander Klingon border to cover the entire Federation frontier. You must have Klingon border to use this product. If you have Romulan border, you already have everything that's in this product. So this gives you just the stuff that you're missing, as I said. You will see there's a little note here as well that they've included an extra map panel to stiffen the package. The maps aren't used anymore, but they're entirely serviceable. So thank you, ADB, for that. You get the extract of the Romulan Space rulebook, which is purely containing the rules you need to operate the ships that are added to the game system via this pack. Okay, so it's got information for these additional ships, basically. Then we have 16 more ship cards, and it's an interesting mix as well. So we have a Federation New Heavy Cruiser, which is a nice flexible ship to fly. You've got a good mix of photons and phasers, as you would expect from the Feds, with a couple of drone racks as well. Then we have a new light cruiser, which is just a slightly less spendy version. So this is 150 points for the cruiser, 125 for the light cruiser. So depending on what kind of squadrons you want to build, it might fit in. You've got a new monster for your enjoyment, which is the large space dragon. These guys are really cool. So basically, they're really fast and maneuverable. They're space-dwelling dragons that breathe plasma out of their face. As you take out their wings, they will lose speed as well. The tail is really good at taking out drones and has effectively unlimited anti-drone ammunition, basically. And it can take out plasma torpedoes as well. So they're really agile and fun to fight. It's one of my favorite monster scenarios, the Space Dragon. And there is, of course, a baby Space Dragon version as well, if you want to just do a quick battle with your friends or whatever. So that's pretty cool. Then we have a mobile base card, which is really great. Having scenarios centered around one player defending or attacking a base is really fun, in my opinion, because particularly with races that use plasma torpedoes, they can have trouble chasing down the enemy on a wide open space map. But if there's a fixed point to attack or defend, then it really focuses the action and really ups the stakes of the scenario. So having a mobile base in here allows you to do those sort of scenarios, which is really cool. Then we've got some Romulan Cruisers. This is a KR heavy cruiser. They actually use some Klingon hulls here, as you can see. It's got that distinctive bird of prey kind of shape, but they've got the plasma torpedoes of the Romulans. And you can see, in keeping with the philosophy of FC, that you can mark up the cards with markers and wipe them off and everything. You have these handy trackers to keep track of where you are in your plasma arming sequence, and they do that, of course, for all the weapons. And then when you launch a plasma torpedo, you can track its remaining potency through these tracks down here. So these are for the plasma S, which has 30 points, for example. So it's really cool, this idea of using these dry erasable, beautiful laminated cards. It's really very convenient for this kind of game. Got a Federation War Destroyer as well, which is a punchy little machine. Surprising amount of heft for its size. We've got the wonderful Battle Cruiser, again, good to take on the Klingon battle cruisers, or maybe even dreadnoughts. Then we have a plasma-armed Fed ship, which is really fun. The Federation did experiment with plasmas, but they never got any of the big plasmas. They used plasma Fs, I believe, and that was about it. Yeah, they have 2 plasma F launchers on this one. But it's cool. It adds some different tactical wrinkles to using these kind of ships. So we've got those guys, and then we have 8 more cards over here. We've got a Gorn battle cruiser, again a plasma user, so a good fit for the Romulan border set. We've got a Gorn destroyer. Now I think the battle cruiser, does he have? No, he's got plasma S's and plasma F's, so he doesn't have a plasma R on this one. It's not one of the bigger dreadnoughts. The destroyer, he just has plasma F's and a few phaser 1s and phaser 3s. The T-Rex Dreadnought. Now here we go. This is getting dangerous. So you can see up at the top here the plasma arming tracks. Plasma launcher A at the front can launch the 50-point plasma R, which is huge. And for that one, you need to pay 2 on the first turn, 2 on the second turn, and then 5 on the third turn of arming to get your big torpedo. So it's a whole operation, but they are very scary once they hit the board. So you've got a Plasma R launcher, a couple of Plasma Fs, and Plasma Ss as well. And then you've got some phasers down the length of this kind of elongated frame. So a really beastly ship, this one. Then we have a Romulan Dreadnought, the Condor. Put him on the squadron scale side here. He's got a Plasma R as well, parked up at the front. Of course, the Romulans have cloaking devices, which are really quite challenging to use. They work just like an SFB, pretty much, in that they will drop lock-ons from enemies seeking weapons and stuff like that, but they don't make you completely invisible or invincible. And there's a fade-in and fade-out period when you use it. And for each ship, depending on the power you have available, you have to think quite carefully how you're going to best use your cloak when it's important to do so. So it's a lot of fun to play the Romulans and try and learn how to use the cloak effectively. Then we got some freighters as well, which are useful for scenarios. And we've got armed priority transports and armed cutters, again, which are kind of unaffiliated security ships that are not, part of the main military force. We have the Romulan Battlehawk, which is a very kind of nostalgic-looking TOS era Romulan frame. This one has some armor and a couple of plasma Gs, so not bad for only 88 points. We have Romulan Skyhawk Destroyer. This is more modern frame for them. So this one, what do we got? We got a couple of phasers up at the front and some plasma Fs. So as a destroyer, it's more designed to be quick and speedy. Plasma Fs have a short range, so you need to kind of get in close to use them. So this is more, I would guess, kind of cloak in, back up your bigger ships that are launching the bigger plasmas. And then we've got a War Eagle Cruiser here, which is a little guy at 103 points, but he's got a big old Plasma R in the middle, which is great fun. I really like using these guys. So that's Romulan Space. So basically, if I'm thinking in American prices, I would imagine that the retail price for one of the border boxes, either Klingon border or Romulan border, is about $60. Of course, you'll get it cheaper depending on your friendly local game store and all that stuff. You can probably save a few bucks. And then it'll be about $40 to get the Romulan Space or Klingon Space kind of add-on to complete your starter pack there. So you're looking at about $100. And you may think, well, that's a lot for just kind of 32 ships. But you do get a lot of scenarios in there. You also have the big, beautiful map boards. You've got the very nice counters, which actually I will show you some of the large counters, which are really nice. They're a little bit thin, but they are built of pretty decent stock. So I've got quite a few punched out here. I've split them up by empire. So here's a classic, the old Fed CA. You can see that they are full color representations of the ships. They are big and chunky, a little bit glossy as well. They look really nice set on the map board with that black background. We've got the classic Klingon D7 here as well. Just see that classic shape. I'm not sure if you get all the detail, but you can see there's quite a lot of detail of the little gribblies. And if you look closely at these counters, you can really see most of the ship's kind of weapon systems and stuff, which is cool. We've got hydrants as well. This is Mohawk Cruiser, I think it is. Some more hydrants. These ones I like a little bit better because you really get that kind of that deep blue, which is what I associate with the hydrants. Got 2 different dreadnoughts here, which are pretty beastly. We have some Saltorians. We've got a hive ship and a battle wagon. Pretty massive ships, in fact. We've got a couple of Romulans here. We've got, this is similar to one of the ships I just showed you, one of the smaller frigate types. Then we've got Orions, which you'll probably recognize. Lyrans, and they come in different colors, just as you see on the counters from SFB. So we've got a big dreadnought here, a CA, and a frigate as well. We've got our friends the Gorn, who we were just looking at a moment ago. A destroyer and a big T-Rex dreadnought with this elongated bottom there. We've got our Gazintes in their distinctive red, a big heavy dreadnought here, and their battleship, which actually looks really nice on the counter. You can see all the many decks and windows there. So they're really nicely done counters. And I do think, if you're an SFB player as well, you could get these separately using the megahex modules. However, in my opinion, if you're going to get these fancy counters, you might as well get a fancy looking game with it. So they work really nicely with FedCom. And FedCom is a great gateway drug to SFB for sure. We have some Neotholians and some regular Tholians, or Archaeotholians if you like. And then the WIN down here at the bottom. There you go. An auxiliary and a destroyer here. And then we've got a whole mess of kind of random stuff and unaffiliated, generic units like monitors and armored priority transports, bases. There's a Fed CL. He should be over here somewhere. So the counters look really great, and you can see there's other ones buried in there for monsters and all kinds of stuff. Star bases, and some more Lyrans over here. So you do get really good quality components for your money. And it's definitely a much better package to show off to your friends if you want to get them into the SFU. I think once they're really down with Federation Commander, then it would be good to move them on to SFB after that. I think it really works well as an intro. But also, I want to stress this. The game works extremely well on its own. You don't need to think of this as a stepping stone to SFB. There's, you can play really interesting and diverse kind of tournament play in this game. There's endless depth in it. It's really satisfying on its own. There are a few things that are a little bit different depending on which empire you're used to if you're used to SFB. But if you're not coming from SFB, you won't know the difference, so it doesn't matter. Okay, so after you get your border set, and then you fill it out with the corresponding Romulan Space or Klingon Space add-on, then where do you go next? Well, like I said, I think the easiest thing to do is to pick up the reference rulebook. So that will give you all the latest rules for everything from all the expansions. And what I recommend that you do is you look through this nicely organized rulebook, with nice little illustrations throughout. Look at the different weapon systems and the background information on them. It'll tell you about the empires that use them, and it gives you some hot tips on what they're good for. And use that to help you decide where you want to go next, because there really are a lot of expansions for this game. But if you have the reference rulebook, then anything you pick up, you'll already have kind of advanced warning of where you're going to head with it. And it's really handy to have. So as you can see, it's got all the rules from Klingon border, Klingon attack, Romulan border, Romulan attack, Tholian attack, battleships attack, distant kingdoms, Orion attack, Hydrant attack, War and peace, booster zero, captain's log, and communique. So even their magazine rules are in here. There's also rules for what they call the Borders of Madness aspect. So there's some additional ship systems that are not considered part of the base FC world, but are ported in from SFB and are kind of optional if you want to use them. So there's things like special sensors right here. So scouts in SFB use these, but they're not kind of, you can see the little star here. They're not kind of standard FC rules, but they really do work well in the game system. So I do recommend you use them. So it's really comprehensive, and it's something like $15, so it's really worth your money. And it's just over 100 pages, which is a hell of a lot less than the 460 pages for all of the SFB rules. So I would get this along with your two starter sets there. And from there, my personal recommendation would be, first of all, to look into the booster packs as far as if you find yourself playing larger battles, if you're using fleet scale, you're flying lots of ships against each other, then you can go to the ADB Federation Commander website. And there's a nice handy list of which booster packs expand which game expansion. Okay, so each booster pack, or each expansion rather, has 3 booster packs associated with it. And those booster packs will contain some repeats of commonly used ships from that expansion and some new ships. Now, if you really want to get the best bang for your buck, because it's a little bit annoying for some people that, when you buy one of these booster packs, basically all it is just a bunch of new ships, right? So you'll pay something like $10, and in this case you get, 1, 2, 3, 4, you get 7 new ships in here. And most of those will be ships that you already have in the base set that they're associated with, and then they'll have one ship that's kind of a bonus, right? That's a new one. That's a little bit of an annoying way to package things. So, the Command Cruiser in this case is a brand new ship, and it's a great ship. It's great to have it. So you might be thinking, well, I don't really want to get into that whole distribution model. So what if I want to get things a little bit more affordably and just focus on kind of maximum new ships for my money. Well, what I would do in that case is I would pick up the Battleship's Attack module. Okay, has 3 boosters associated with it. First of all, Battleship's Attack is cool because it has battleships in it. And these are really look extra impressive in FC because they're done on full-size 8.5 by 11 ship cards. Okay, so this module just straight up gives you battleships for all the main empires, and it gives you a full-size star base as well. And you get all the counters you need. You get some asteroid field panels, which is great. But look at these guys. They're really, really, really impressive. Boom. Huge. So we got the classic Klingon B-10, which is the only battleship that was supposedly historically built in SFB. I think in FC they've decided to say the hell with it, and that everybody did end up making a battleship. But I don't know if I'm just making that up. I probably shouldn't tell you that definitively. But in any case, they're all here and they're all playable, and they're great fun. So I mean, look at this; it's just gigantic. Then we have the Federation battleship, which of course is, as you would expect, completely stacked with photons, drones, and prickling with phasers. Then we have the Romulan King Condor battleship, which is actually shrunken down quite a bit because they need to put all these plasma trackers here because there's so many plasma launchers. We've got 2 plasma Rs in the front. We've got some plasma Fs, plasma S, plasma Ds here as well for short-range fighter defense, plasma S in the back. I mean, there's loads of stuff flying across the board when you use these battleships. We got the Gazinti. This thing can just launch hella drones at everybody, which is a lot of fun. You can see it can control 12 seeking weapons, which is the case for a lot of the larger Gazinti ships. So you can really fill the board with missiles with this guy, and it's a lot of fun. And it's fairly, none of these ships are particularly hard to understand. It's just that there's more to track because they are gigantic. Then we have the Gorn Godzilla, and I'm a big fan of Godzilla movies, so, this ship is very near and dear to my heart. Much like with the Romulans, you do have a lot of plasmas to keep track of, and 2 plasma R launchers in the front, along with all your phasers and everything everywhere else. This is a really great ship to use. You can see, the point values for these things are all between about 350 and 400. They're really enormous. And the Neotholian Battleship, I really like this guy. I mean, the Tholians are really tactically interesting to play, just as much so in FC as in SFB. This battleship is huge. It's got webcasters, which are incredibly fun to use. You can create blocking strands of web on the board at will, which, restrict your enemy's movements. They can run into them and get disabled. They can, form screens against enemy fire. I mean, they're really flexible and interesting and fun to use. And the Neotholians, you can do so many cool tricks with this battleship. It's a lot of fun. And of course, the Tholians can fire through their webs, just like in SFB. So you can really mess with people's heads with this. I really, really like this ship in particular. Then we've got the Saltorian Wagon, the Tholians' rebellious subjects. I mean, look at the sheer size of this thing. And it's a full 500 points. And it's just completely loaded, look, with this huge bank of 9 phasers in the front. Then we've got particle cannons as well, web breakers everywhere, all the way down the length of it. So the Tholians are not happy if they see one of these show up on the long-range scans, right? Then we have the Starbase, which is great to have this big generic card. It also tells you which weapon types you would put into the weapon mounts, depending on which base is controlling it. So you can use this for any kind of major Starbase defense scenario. It's really, really great to have this on a big old card like this. And of course, you've got the fleet scale as well on the other side. So that's really cool to have. Yeah, so get battleships, because then you get a big Starbase, you get big battleships, it's lots of fun. And then get the 3 booster packs that go with battleships, because those have a bunch of new ships in them. I think there's only a couple of cards in there that are repeats from elsewhere. And so boosters 16, 17, and 18 are what you want to get. And I will find those for you just in a moment. These guys right here, these are, like I said, they're tied up with battleships because these are all pretty big ships. It's got 8 new cards in, which one is this? This is booster 18. So you get all these cool Dreadnoughts, and the light and heavy Dreadnoughts and the light and heavy for the Gorn are all new ships. So you get 4 new ships in this pack. In this one, you get 7 new ships in this pack. In Booster 17. In Booster 16, you get 4 new ones. So these are really good value, basically. All the ships are really fun as well to fly. So in this one, you've got a bunch of Romulan Dreadnoughts. You've got fast ones, heavy and light. You've got Gorn, Tholian Dreadnoughts. Then in Booster 17, you get your Klingon Dreadnoughts, another Tholian, some Lyrans and Hydrants. And then in 16, you've got the Federation and Kzinti and Neotholian Dreadnought. And bear in mind, of course, since you have the reference rulebook, if you've been following my little purchasing guide here, you will be able to use all of these ships that are from empires you haven't yet seen, right? Because there's Tholians, there's Lyrans, Hydrants, Tholians, etc. in here. But you'll be fine because you have the reference rulebook. You can play all of them. So that, to me, is a good value, this little set right here. Battleship's Attack will set you back maybe $30. Each booster pack is $10, okay? But within that, you get 24 ships in here. Most of them will be new to you. And you get 9 battleships and a starbase in this pack. So that would be where I would go next. From there, if there's an empire that you'll get a taste of new empires from this, right? Because you have big old ships from the Tholians and Hydrants and Lyrans and everybody. Try those out. If you find that they are to your taste, then pick up the appropriate expansions to go with them. And those would be, you've got, of course, the Orions. So this pack, like all the other expansions, contains 16 cards, but it's focused on the Orion pirates. And it also comes with various kind of targets and enemies that they would face. So police ships for different empires and freighters and whatnot. If you are interested in the Andromedan Invaders, the ISC, and the Vudar, then you want War and Peace, which is a really nice subset of cards in here, and lots of the duplicates are actually useful in the booster packs in this one, particularly for the ISC, which likes to fly big specialized fleets. Then you have Romulan Attack and Klingon Attack. They are expansions for Romulan Border and Klingon Border, respectively. So if you want to focus on the main classic Star Trek empires, then get these 2 expansions. If you want to fly Hydrants and their fighters, along with the Lyrans, then you would look into Distant Kingdoms and Hydrant Attack. So Distant Kingdoms is the one that first introduced the Lyrans, Hydrants, and WIN to the FC gaming system. And you can see, again, you get all your counters, new map panels, 16 cards, the usual stuff. But this is what introduced these 3 emperors to the game. And then the Hydrant Attack module further expands that with many more options for ships and stuff. And I'm a big fan of the Hydrants, as I mentioned in the SFB video. So I think that would be the next step I would recommend beyond Battleship's Attack. So by that point, you've got some pretty cool big ships, big tough beasts that can dominate space. They've given you a sample of the different empires. Then you can choose the next empire you want to focus on. Okay. If you then want to expand, again, a bunch of different empires at once with a good value proposition, then you want to go to Reinforcements Attack, okay, which is the most recent expansion. It's got a fantastic cover, by the way. I love this cover. So much going on here. Now, this one, you get 18 cards in this one, which include ground bases, ships for the Feds, Klingons, Romulans, Gorns, Tholians, Hydrants, Andromedans, Lyrans, everybody, basically. And a new monster to fight, the Sun Snake, which is a cool one. But even better, so this is all a bunch of great new stuff, right? Cool ships. The 3 boosters associated with this expansion are 34, 35, and 36. Let me just find 36. Here you go. These 3 boosters are all entirely new stuff. Okay. The reason I suggested the battleship stuff before these is that I find these a little bit more specialized, like these fleet escorts, for example. If you're just getting started with the game, you're not going to be really worried about force composition and stuff like that. So like big battleships and big dreadnoughts are just fun to fly, right off the bat. These ships, however, they're a little bit more specialized in their role. And you've got things like these police cutters and stuff and raiders that are a little bit, have different roles on the battlefield. And these war cruisers and escort cruisers. These I would save until you're a bit more familiar with the system. But this is great value because every single card in these 3 expansions is brand new to the game. So you really do get a proper feeling of reinforcements from Reinforcements Attack. You get great new stuff in here for every empire and a bunch of new great additions here from boosters 34, 35, and 36. So that would be my recommended next step. And then what I would do, first of all, is buy all the rest of the expansions at that point, because you might as well have kind of the core ships for every empire if you've gotten this far. But if you're looking to save a few bucks and you just want something really kind of a new challenge for the system, then you should pick up briefing number 2. You'll see this is just a single softcover book, but there's tons of value in here because there are 72 new ships in here. The theme of briefing number 2 is a period in SFU history called the Middle Years. And this is before the big war, the General War, which is when most of the ship designs that you see in these expansions are from the General War period. The Middle Years was a bit before that, and the ships are not quite so optimized for fighting. They have a little bit more struggles with getting enough power to do everything they want, so you've got to make some hard choices in combat when you're flying them. They have a little bit less armament, a little bit less speed, and things like drones are slower. They move at speed 16 instead of speed 24. So it really changes up the way the game feels. And the great thing is, you can buy this. It cost me £15.99, so I would guess it's about $20 in America. $20 for this book, and you get 72 new ships in here. Now note that they are all in black and white, but still totally playable, nicely done in grayscale. You can see they're all marked out with Middle Years there, so you're not going to get confused about which ones you're fighting with. And you can just, break the book apart and photocopy them or scan them, whatever you need to do. You can buy this in PDF. They did colorize everything for the PDF, which is great, but then they also split the 72 ships into 6 different PDF packs plus an additional pack that contains the rules and scenarios. And altogether, it cost something like $55 or $60. And I was really disappointed with that. I did end up buying them, so I got kind of suckered myself into paying the money, but really, I would say track down a physical copy or buy it direct from ADB and scan it in for yourself and deal with the black and white. I'm sorry to say that, but I just don't think it's worth it. The price that they charge for the colorized PDFs, it's really too much, in my opinion. But yeah, the book in physical form is fantastic value. Endless variety, 72 ships, covers all the main players. Tons of cool stuff to fly in here, and it is really a nice new challenge because they are middle year ships that can't do everything that you might want to do. So I do recommend that. Yeah, so that's briefing number 2. And that's basically kind of your whirlwind tour of FC. I know there's a lot that I've covered in a short time. I didn't want to get into showing you the specifics of every single product because, the basic thing to remember, get yourself Klingon border or Romulan border, and then the corresponding space version of the other set that just gives you the non-duplicated stuff. Start with that. There's plenty in there to give you a great time with your friends, learning the system. You'll find, there's so many interesting optimizations you can do to learn how to fly better and how to fight better. Enjoy that for as long as you can. When it gets stale, get yourself the reference rule book so you've got all the latest, rules in case you want to start flying bigger fleets and doing cool stuff. Think about if you want to get into specific new Empire expansions based on the rules you find in there for the new weapons. Then I would go, once again, with Battleships Attack first and Boosters 16, 17, and 18. Then I would look into whichever specific Empire-related expansions you want to get into. And then I would highly recommend Reinforcements Attack and Boosters 34, 35, and 36, which are pretty much the best value in FC. Actually, the other thing to look out for is that recently they have finally decided to release some new physical ship card products in the forms of Boosters 38, 37, 38, 39, and 40. Only 37 and 38 have been released so far. I bought them. They just came in these kind of plastic bags, and I combined them into one bag. But these have been really nice, interesting ships, and these are all ships that are new to the game system, and they're not associated with one of these kind of something attack products. These are just new stuff that deserves to be in FC, and I think they're really been cool so far. I'll show you what you get in 37 and 38. We get cool stuff for the Hydrants. We get medium command cruisers, cruiser leaders for the Tholians. There's a bunch of leader variants and command variants in these so far, which are really handy when you want to build a proper battle force, with everybody getting the appropriate kind of support in the squadron. We've got frigate leaders, war destroyer leaders, war cruiser leaders for all the different main empires here, even the Vudar. So yeah, these are also good value. If you can track them down, they do appear whenever Leisure Games here in the UK does a restock, you'll find them, but they don't restock that often, so you do have to be a bit patient. Or of course you can get them anytime off of the ADB website. But these are another option to get good sort of value for your dollar. Once again, they are kind of, everything in the pack is new. You're not getting repeats, which is great. But they are more specialized. So I would put these in the queue kind of around or even after the reinforcements attack and boosters 34, 35, 36, because they are these kind of more specialized leader and command variants. But if you do find that you want to build proper, historical SFU battle forces with your friends and you want to have those variants in your hand rather than printing them off the PDFs and stuff, then I would just go out and get them. I mean, they're readily available and will fit nicely into your burgeoning ship card collection. I mentioned before about the problem with the PDF products for briefing number 2. I also mentioned at the beginning of the video that in general there's a bit of an issue with PDF offering. So just to clarify what I meant by that, basically I've been showing you all these booster packs and stuff and how they kind of relate to the products, the different attack products and border products. And the problem is that there's no kind of direct translation of that into the PDF sphere. Instead, what you get is the E-packs, ship E-packs. They're divided up by empire, and they bear no relation to the structure of the attack products or the boosters. So you might get, Federation card E-pack number 1, and it's nothing to do with what's in this booster pack or whatever. It's very confusing. I don't know why it's been done that way. I guess they felt that it would make more sense to people who want to buy PDFs for cards for their favorite empire, and I can see that to a degree, but honestly, I was initially very confused to log on to the ADB online presence and look on DriveThruRPG, which is my preferred platform, and find that the products were totally different. I couldn't just get booster number 3 in digital form. I would have to buy, the booster number 3 contains some stuff from the Tholians, stuff from the Feds, stuff from the Klingons, I think. So that would be, 3 different E-packs and may not be the things I necessarily wanted. And there's definitely ships, I believe, that are missing from the E-pack offering that and don't seem to be moving particularly quickly in terms of getting those things available digitally. So that to me is a real shame, and I think I've read some comments on the BBS and stuff that the E-packs are not selling very well, and I think there's a couple of reasons for that. I would have bought a lot more FC PDF products a lot earlier if they were A, significantly cheaper, and B, had a direct correspondence to the physical products. I simply did not buy them at all until very recently when there was enough E-packs that I thought, okay, at least I can build up a decent chunk of digital ships. But the value proposition is not that great because a lot of the packs have 6 ships for $5, which is a bit cheaper than the physical product. But when you consider that most of the times the physical product is discounted a little bit by whatever retailer you happen to be buying from, it's not much of a saving, maybe 20% less than the physical product. And compared to, for example, buy an RPG from Modiphius like Star Trek Adventures, the PDFs are free with my physical product purchase. And then to go what feels like a step back to where my physical product does not entitle me to any electronic equivalent, and the electronic equivalent actually doesn't exist. I mean, there is no electronic version of Booster Pack 26, you know what I mean? I have to figure out what ships I want specifically and then try to optimize my purchases around that. Or just say, throw my hands in the air, give up, and buy everything. And that to me is really a shame. And that, I can't speak for anybody else, but the reason why I did not buy any FC PDFs at all until very recently was because of these problems. If they had been a better value proposition, more ships for $1, because it's not a physical product, they should be cheaper. That's just the norm of the market now. And if they had had a direct correspondence to the physical booster packs and attack products, then I would have picked them up much more readily. But as it stood, I had to justify it to myself for quite a while before I could make that leap. But I do think, if you've got the money to spare, it is worthwhile to have the cards in PDF because, you can get some cool variants and maybe you don't want to shell out for a whole physical booster pack, and the booster packs are a little bit more pricey. But, I really like having the physical cards, and it's just a shame that I can't just buy the physical cards and then have, little bits and mortar code inside the cover and just go and download them for free, like I can with so many other products. And that's a shame that, Federation Commander is a really great effort to move the SFU gaming system into a modern era, but they really, in my mind, they stopped short of doing that when it came to the PDF offering, and that's a real shame because I think that does turn people off. I just hope that, over time they'll get a bit more generous with it, and maybe try to make more clear to the players in, a system that's already a bit complicated to figure out what you should buy and when, to then have PDF offerings that are so different from the physical ones is not great in my opinion. But having said all that, as you can see, the components are really fun and nice. The colorful ship cards work great. One thing I would say is the later printings of the cards, sometimes they will stain a little bit when you're using your dry erase markers. So what you can do is get a half-letter sized sleeves, like document sleeves, and cover your cards with that. And then you can just wipe them down instead of writing directly on the cards. That works really well. I've actually got a new shipment of those coming from America sometime soon, so I can have a lot of my cards pre-sleeved rather than just keeping them in the booster packs like this. So that would be my last kind of recommendation. But if you get, decent quality dry erase markers, you probably won't have a problem, but it's worth just knowing that you may get a little bit of residual staining after you wipe them down. So better to use the sleeves, in my opinion. But yeah, I think it's a great approach to Starship combat. It stands on its own very well, apart from SFB. The one downside I would say to the actual gameplay is that a few of the simplifications don't make a lot of sense to me. So, for example, our friends, the Kzintis, right? They, in SFB, a big reason that they are differentiated from the other empires and present a unique threat is that they use many more drones, and you have this huge options of different types of drones that you can fire. The Kzinti get more access to those. They can use greater amounts and varieties of specialist drone payloads. None of that exists in FC. You only have just drones, and they all move speed 24 and do 20 points of damage, and that's it. And that's too bad for the Kzinti because without that edge and without the kind of seeking weapon guessing game, they're a lot less fun to play. And then there's other stuff like your shuttles. So here you can see we've got two fighters here for the Hydrants, and then these are the regular shuttles. The admin shuttles in SFB, they are lightly armed. They have a phaser 3 that fires 360 degrees. So you often put those out onto the board as a kind of last-ditch distraction attempt or to clear up some drones that your phasers can't catch or whatever. But the shuttles aren't armed in this game, which is strange because people who watch the shows will find that a little bit kind of pulling them out of the fantasy a little bit because if you're watching Next Gen or whatever, the shuttles of course have phasers. So I tend to use a house rule that they do have phaser 3s. And in my mind, it hasn't unbalanced the game. It just adds more incentive to put the shuttles out on the board and use them, which is fun. As it stands now in base FC, you just basically see them when it's part of a scenario objective or you need to land troops on a planet or something. But it's fun to have shuttles come out and, moving at a tiny little slow speed with their one piddly phaser. And sometimes they'll win the battle for you, which is great. It's more fun. So there's little changes like that I don't, I understand they were made in the name of simplicity, but I don't think that they really added a lot. I think they subtracted a little bit too much in that case. And in particular, if you're a Kzinti player from SFB, you'll find it a bit more frustrating to play them in FC, I think, because you won't be able to do that kind of optimizing your drone payloads and messing with your opponent's head stuff that you can do in full SFB. But again, if you're not an SFB player, none of this will mean anything to you, and it won't matter. And, I find that the empires are pretty well balanced in the base FC game. And most of the empires do have their unique stuff. The Romulans have their big plasmas. They have cloak devices. The Hydrants have their fighters and hellbores and fusions. The Feds have their typical phaser, drone, and photon torpedo mixes. Everybody's got their thing. It's just that, in particular, I find the Kzinti suffered a little bit. My favorite empires did not particularly suffer so much. So the Hydrants are still great. The Tholians are still fun. And the web rules are still the most complicated in FC, just as they are in SFB. So those are my kind of main downsides. But really, if you want to play SFB, but in a tighter, faster playing form, you really can't go wrong with this. It's really a lot of fun. And I've really enjoyed, collecting all these cards over the years. And, it's also, it's a great way to introduce new players to Starship combat in the Starfleet universe, and there's nothing wrong with that. So I do highly recommend FC. Even if you are an SFB player, you should have this game in your wheelhouse, I believe, so that you can introduce new players to this kind of gameplay who maybe are only used to today's really highly produced hobbyist board games. SFB is a relic of a different era. Once people get past that presentational element, they'll find, it's impossible, in my opinion, to find a richer game than SFB in the hobby. But you've got to get past a lot of kind of downsides presentationally to really see that. But FC removes that barrier and doesn't lose too much of the richness, in my opinion. So, even if you might want to wrinkle your nose at the fact that you don't have different types of drones or whatever, it's still a great game to play. And it will get people over that hump where they say, ooh, you know what? Complicated Starship combat is actually really fun and interesting, and I want to play more of it. Then you can start to bring them into the SFB world if that's the direction you want to go. Or you can just play FC and have a great time. And recently they released a tactics manual as well, which shows, all the advancements that have been made in tournament play in FC over the last 10 plus years. I don't have it yet, but I do plan to get my hands on it, so I'm looking forward to that. So really, it's nearly as rich as SFB itself. So I wouldn't immediately turn your nose up at it if you are an SFB diehard. And having something to get newbies in the door is a really positive thing. So that's my hour-long ramble on FC. I hope that was helpful to give some people out there an idea of how to start with this gaming system. I didn't want to show you every single ship card because there are a lot of them. But yeah, I think it's well worth looking into. If you have questions about what I've shown or about my recommendations, please just hit me up in the comments, and I'll answer as much as I can. One thing I would say as well is I'll put a link in the description to the Commander Circle on the Federation Commander website. Definitely go there and download all the issues of Communique, which is the magazine that ran up until I think end of 2019 or so, where every issue had free ship cards for Federation Commander. I broke out all those cards from Communique into compilation files for my own use. And in the end, I had 806 new ship cards. Granted, some of those were repeats because they were, two sides of, a fleet scale and a squadron scale of one ship, or they were revised versions of a previously printed card. But a lot of those are actually new. So that is a great value. Those are all free. They're all in the Commander Circle. So if you decide to pick up FC, and you got your reference rule book, so you can use all the different widgets in the game system, go get everything from Communique, and you'll instantly have hundreds of ships at your disposal. So I'll put the link in the description for that. Try the game out. Let me know what you think, and hit me up in the comments if you have questions. I will do some more detailed videos in the future about the FC product line, as well as SFB. I've got a couple of SFB videos already kind of in editing that I will put up with some more details about the expansions. I'm happy to do the same for FC as well. Anyway, enough out of me. I hope you're all doing well. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you again next time. Take care. Bye-bye.